In this video, I'll be talking about the latest news from the Linux Mint world. The development team has just published their monthly report for February 2026, and I'm going to walk you through everything that's been worked on behind the scenes, from new and practical features to a fascinating story about a bug that persisted for nearly a decade and a half. Stay with me, because the topics are truly interesting. I also have another video on the channel about the latest Linux Mint updates. You'll find the link in the description. Definitely worth watching if you haven't seen it already. Let's start with something simple but extremely useful. The Linux Mint team has added a dedicated sensors page directly inside the System Reports tool. What does this mean in practice? It means you can now see at a glance all the sensors detected on your computer: CPU temperature, fan speeds, GPU temperature, and much more. The values update automatically in real time without needing to install separate applications or open a terminal. This is a feature that many users have been waiting for a long time. If you've ever used tools like pSensor or LM sensors in the terminal, you know how useful it can be to monitor your system's temperature, especially on a laptop. Now everything is neatly integrated directly into the Linux Mint graphical interface, exactly as it should be on a distribution focused on comfort and ease of use. One important detail to mention: the list of available sensors depends on your computer's manufacturer. Some systems expose a lot of detailed information, others less so. But regardless of your situation, you now at least have a centralized place to check this data without any hassle. This is, without a doubt, the main topic of the month. The team has completed a new screensaver for Cinnamon, and it comes with truly good news on multiple fronts. Let's first take a step back and understand how the old screensaver worked. Until now, Cinnamon used a separate program called Cinnamon Screensaver. It was an independent process that ran alongside the desktop session, written in Python and C, using the GTK toolkit, and designed specifically for the Xor graphics environment. It looked decent and worked reasonably well, but it suffered from a few serious problems. The first and biggest problem: it didn't work at all on Wayland. Wayland is the future of graphics on Linux: more secure, more modern, more efficient. But Cinnamon couldn't offer full compatibility with it, precisely because of this old screensaver. The second problem: the visual transition between the desktop and the screensaver wasn't smooth. There was an ugly jump, a sudden change of image that broke the user experience. And the third problem: the code was complex and inherited from the GNOME 2 era, full of features that were no longer necessary in 2026. The new screensaver fixes all of these problems in one move. How? Very simply and elegantly. It's no longer a separate process. Cinnamon itself now handles screen locking directly and natively, using its own widgets and toolkit. There's no longer an external program that needs to sync with a window manager. Everything happens inside the same process. The immediate result is that the transition animation is much smoother, the lock screen looks native and integrated with the system theme, and, most importantly, it works fully on Wayland. And this opens a very important door for the future of Linux Mint: the possibility of switching to Wayland by default. The team hasn't made a definitive decision on this yet, but has stated that they want to have that option on the table. And with the new screensaver, this finally becomes a technical reality. And speaking of Wayland, if you want to know what it's actually like to use it on Linux Mint right now, I have a video on the channel. You'll find the link in the description. Now comes perhaps the most interesting part of the monthly report. It's a story about a mysterious bug, about software complexity, and about how simplification can solve problems that otherwise seem unsolvable. For years, there was an annoying behavior in the Cinnamon screensaver. Sometimes, when resuming from suspend or opening the laptop lid, you could see the desktop session for a fraction of a second before the screensaver appeared, meaning the screen would unlock for just a moment, long enough for the session content to potentially be visible, and only after that would the lock screen appear. This is what's known as a race condition, a situation where two competing processes reach an unpredictable result depending on the order in which they execute. And precisely because it was random, it happened sometimes, not all the time. It was extremely difficult to reproduce in a controlled way, and therefore almost impossible to debug. Think about how many components were involved. the window manager, the screensaver as a separate process, the Xorg graphics server, and the login system service. 4 different components, each with its own logic, each communicating with the others. And on top of all that, approximately 6 overlapping timers for 4 different screen-off scenarios: the screensaver timeout, manual locking, suspend, and closing the laptop lid. An enormous puzzle with thousands of possible combinations. The team tried to fix this problem countless times over the years. Without success, when a bug appears randomly, you can't even confirm whether a change actually fixed it or just made it less frequent. And then came the new screensaver. Suddenly, the window manager and the screensaver were one and the same, not 4 components, but 3. There was no longer a separate window that Xorg had to stack on top. The team managed to reproduce the issue with a simple sequence, just manually locking the screen with no login intervention at all. This dramatically narrowed down the problem. And eventually they found the cause. The issue was related to power saving and the command sent to Xorg to turn off the screen. It turns out that Xorg, in the process of switching off the display, sometimes fails to render graphics events in time, so even though the session was already locked logically, the visual frames weren't updating on screen before it turned off. And when the screen came back on, those unrendered frames appeared for a brief moment, frames from the unlocked session, from before the lock had taken effect. It was a rendering bug in Xorg, triggered by the specific screen-off sequence, and it's now fixed, not only in the new screensaver, but also as an update to the old one after extensive testing. But beyond the technical fix, the Linux Mint team draws an important lesson from this experience. Excessive complexity is not neutral. When a system has too many niche features, too many use cases, too many overlapping timers, bugs appear that affect everyone and can persist for years or even decades without being resolved. The Cinnamon Screensaver inherited logic from a time when computers didn't have laptops, when CRT monitors were susceptible to pixel burn-in, when turning off the screen was a hardware-related technical concern. Today, the priorities are completely different. Locking the session for privacy, battery level on the lock screen, multimedia controls, the on-screen keyboard, the fingerprint reader, a totally different set of needs compared to 15 years ago. The team says they will proceed step by step. The next Cinnamon release will keep the exact same configuration options, introduce the new screensaver, and maintain compatibility with the old one as a fallback. The release after that will drop the old screensaver entirely and simplify all the screen locking logic adapted to the technical realities of 2026. Now, a screensaver isn't just about aesthetics. It's a security component. If the screensaver freezes or crashes, your session must still remain locked. The screen should never become accessible without a password, no matter what is happening in the background. The Cinnamon team has taken this responsibility seriously. There is an additional process dedicated to hiding the screen in the event of a crash. This worked well with the old screensaver too, but it required a lot of testing to verify that there was no scenario in which the protection could fail. And the same level of care applies to the new screensaver. For this reason, even though Cinnamon Screensaver will eventually be discontinued, the next Cinnamon release will support both options, the new screensaver as default and the old one as a fallback. This allows for an extended testing period on both Xorg and Wayland before the transition becomes complete and final. So February turned out to bring more than it might seem at first glance. A sensor monitoring feature, useful and practical. A new screensaver that brings Wayland compatibility and opens the door to the future of graphics on Linux. And the fix for a mysterious bug that had been haunting Cinnamon for nearly a decade and a half. Linux Mint continues to prove that a mature distribution doesn't mean a stagnant one, but one that evolves carefully and responsibly towards its users. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next updates. Let me know in the comments which feature you're looking forward to the most in the next Linux Mint release. See you soon.